All right, welcome, Chameli.
Mm. So happy to be here with you.
Likewise. And I'd love to start by asking you how you began your day today.
Today I was dancing in my living room, singing to the goddess. I'm so happy you asked this question today because it's not every day starting like this, but it was actually ecstatic this morning. It was ecstatic, so grateful to be alive, just singing to her. So grateful to have another breath, and I don't take it for granted.
Beautiful.
And then I went to the woods with my dogs. That's what I do every morning.
Great way to start the day.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I was preparing for this conversation, I was just looking back over the years, and we've known one another for a long time. I think I was first introduced to you back in around 2007-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And we shared a mutual spiritual teacher, Shantimai. I'm not sure if that
Mm-hmm.
was how we first met, but I know
I
I
believe
remember that.
so. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it
I
was there.
remember that you had an ebook on leading women's circles.
Mm.
And I started leading women's circles. I was living in northern Thailand at the time. I started leading some women's circles in Chiang Mai based on that book. And you and I began leading women's spirituality programs online at around the same time in the
Mm.
around like 2010-ish or so. And I know a lot has changed since then for each of us, for the world. And, a few years ago, as I was emerging from a version of my own kind of dark night of the soul, which I read about in my new book, Handbook for the Heartbroken, I remember listening to an interview with you where you shared that you were just emerging from a similar experience of your own, different context. And I'm wondering
Mm.
if you can speak more about what that time was like for you.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Ooh, there's
It
so
is a
many.
big
There's
question,
yes.
a lot
I
of
can speak
facets.
first about just what happened or the kind of the circumstances. The circumstances was somehow a mixture of many different um, aspects, relationships in my life that fell apart and or died in literal and in the metaphorical way. And it was kind of a perfect storm. I went through menopause. The pandemic came. Pandemic was a lot of I that kind of activated a kind of a place in me that wanted to save everybody. So I went into full savior mode and created a kind of online wisdom school, and um, that was enormous amount of stress, and also the financial stress of being responsible for 12 employees, and I wanted to save everybody and from this impact of the pandemic, which I later on in this process of course discovered was part of my coping patterns that needed to be seen in that very extreme way. And in the midst of that, my stepson died. He died in an accident, and uh, yeah, it was the most devastating experience of my life. And parallel to that, my marriage fell apart, along with two other kind of core relationships that I thought was forever. So it was there was nothing I could do to control anything. I was just thrown into the underworld where I was just disintegrating. And it was frightening, really frightening. There was periods where I thought I would not survive. I thought there was periods I couldn't function. I couldn't move. There was periods I was just crawled. I wanted just to crawl under my bed or into a corner of the bathroom and just disappear. Um, and there was also a disintegration of even my relationship to goddess, which I thought was the most unshakable relationship in my life, I could never imagine that that would ever be shaken. But even that was kind of stripped from me. There was periods where I felt so betrayed by her and so angry and so lost. And the blessing in all of this was that I had a mentor that held me through it. And she had trust in this process I was in. She didn't save me. She didn't fix me. She had trust in that this was my soul liberating itself from false or borrowed roles and patterns, and that I was going through an initiation. And she could see that when I could not see that. She could trust when I could not trust. And that was the greatest blessing, because she could then hold me when I could not hold anything. And yeah, in that holding, there was something that started to rise from the deep, from the dark. There was something coming up from the deep. That was, I call it like the black soma. It's like a, it's like a trust that is not, that has no polarity or opposite. It is a trust of my, it's just a, I could retrieve just an essential belonging, an essential trust, an essential beingness, isness, amness that was all that was left when all of the borrowed identities disappeared. And it was so humbling. It was something doing me. Yeah, it was nothing I could do. Like, I have been a practitioner, I've been a teacher of feminine spirituality for so many years, more than 20 years. And there was parts of this underworld journey where all the signposts and pathways disappeared. I couldn't hold on to even, all of those things that I have been working with dark goddess. I have been working with shadow in my work. But this was a whole nother level. And it feels like, in one way, my spiritual practice for more than 30 years was a preparation for this initiation. It feels like I had established enough pathways in my body that these utterly exiled parts of myself could begin to arise and expose themselves. And when that happened, so much of my coping, was not working anymore. It was not needed anymore in one way. That was like the more results I'm sitting in now. But it was this sense of seeing how so much of what I have called myself, even in the name of spirituality, was ways to avoid certain aspects of my own being. Yeah.
I relate to so much of what you just shared. That, similarly, well, first, I'm sorry that all that happened for you. And that's a lot. And I relate, and that is like these periods when all these things are happening at once. And it brings you to the place of just, I don't even know what the words are. Just, yeah, nothing that, no orienting sign internally or externally that you've ever drawn on before can help you to meet that level of destruction or intensity. And I love that you use the word initiation, because that's a word that I use a lot when I speak about heartbreak and devastation for women. And I don't feel like it's a framework that is that readily available in our culture. We see these things as more of failures or huge setbacks. So can you speak more about this concept of how these periods are an initiation? What are they an initiation into?
Yeah. I am a student of mythology, and in mythology, we find these maps of initiation. We find that there are pathways that have been walked before us. For me, when everything fell apart, there was one myth, the myth of Inanna, the goddess of the heavens, who descends down into the underworld and meet her dark sister there. And she dies in the underworld. She hangs on the hook for 3 days. This is like a myth before the Christ story, older than the Christ story, but similar pathways, where she hangs on the hook as a piece of rotting meat, this glorious goddess of the heavens. And then she ascends again, and she ascends initiated. And it is that sense of when things fall apart, when mistakes happen, like things that we never would choose. I would never choose my son to die. I would never choose. We don't necessarily choose these times of falling apart or crisis. But with the framework of initiation, we can begin to see that when things fall apart, there's cracks, there's a opening, there's an availability when we are not no longer holding it together. There is the possibility for a deeper layer of our being to incarnate, to arise through the surface and incarnate. And the goddess Inanna, she ascends up from the underworld initially because she has seen herself deeper than all the roles she plays. So on the way down to the underworld, she has to sacrifice her crown, her goddess robe. She has to sacrifice everything she identifies with. And then when she arrives again, she puts on the crown, she puts on the clothes again, but she can't unsee what she has seen. She has seen the living, breathing spirit, the pureness of her being. So now her roles and identities are also seen for what they are. They are not who she is. These are different roles and identity that her soul is incarnating through. So there's a sense of knowing yourself. And that's how I experience myself now when I speak about this trust without an opposite. It's this sense of having, it's almost like when you have faced the worst, there's a freedom in that. When you have experienced that which you fear the most, there is a freedom in that, because there is a sense of, and I'm still here. That there's something in me that is stronger, that life force energy is still here. And how I experience it is that is internal, that my spirit is eternal, and that eternal spirit is not some abstract place away from here. It is that which breathes me and moves me and speaks through me here and now. And it, in many shamanic traditions, initiations are also literally life-threatening. Like it is, you're brought to places where you either you may not survive. Either you really die, or you go crazy, or you arise free. You arise with a new sense of self. And so it's not, it's important for me to also to emphasize how challenging it is. It's not like to sugarcoat or romanticize these times of darkness. They're horrible. And but for me, that framework was with me even when I couldn't trust, but even when I thought that this is not healthy, this is like I will not be able to put myself together again. But I had this framework in the back of my being that that could kind of trust the process. And as I said, my mentor could also do that for me when I couldn't, because there's not much framework, like you said, in our culture for this. So what happens is that we rush, we try to fix it too quickly. We try to patch it up too quickly, and and then we miss the opportunities that are there in the dark. Yeah, it's almost like only when we fall apart can we really know who holds us. Yeah, and before that, we will just use our life force energy to buckle up and kind of kind of try to keep ourselves on the surface, because there is like such a deep mistrust in goddess, yeah, which is part of our culture. That is that mistrust in the Great Mother. That is how we get shaped into so much of our activities are motivated from that mistrust, yeah, to try to find safety. And we just kind of, we try to just cling to the surface in hope that will keep us safe. So there's a kind of relaxation when you kind of fail in that project and you just fall apart, and then you say, oh gosh, what helped me? What guided me through? I'm here. What is that holds me? Yeah.
I love how you talk about just like the life and death nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so relatable. And there were so many times along my path over those several years that I was in where I thought I would die.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't see any way out. And similar as you, I had this deep reservoir of practice. So like some deeper part of me had some sense of a compass of like knowing, like remembering there is always dawn after the dark. But then there were parts of me that were doubting that, but yeah, maybe not this time. Or maybe I don't know what this is, but maybe the dawn's not coming. And then the importance of mentorship is similar to you. I found a new mentor came into my life during those years who had been through something similar. And she calls it the midlife initiation, where, you know, it's really, as you're saying, like that shedding of that which isn't us, which we've outgrown, and just allowing that the deeper truth of who we are to come forward, and just how life-saving it is in those times to have a mentor who has walked that path and who can just be with you in it.
Yeah, yeah. Even in this myth of Inanna, before she descends in the underworld, she places her priestess on the surface, and the priestess is there beating the drum and kind of guarding her as she goes down. And that Ninshuber, the priestess, is a part of our own consciousness. You know, that is also a part that can hold ourselves when we move into emotions, or we move into difficult challenges, that there's a part of our consciousness that can hold and see that, okay, this is a journey. It will change. And sometimes the mentor or the therapist or the guide is holding that consciousness for us so that we can fully go into that, fully let go into that process, where we are not guiding it, where we are not controlling it. Yeah, that there is something valuable that happens in that loss of control. Yeah.
And you mentioned that, you know, even that your usual practices and even just your orienting relationship with goddess herself kind of fell away at that time. So in addition to your mentor, like what were some other practices or things that you now see in retrospect helped you through all of this?
You know, when it was at its worst, it felt as if was clinging to my bed or clinging to the walls, just trying to find something to hold on to. It was this sense of just, especially in the nights, yeah, I couldn't sleep. It was this desperation, anxiety through my body, which was a feeling. Anxiety has not really been a feeling that has been much present in my body. So it was overwhelming me, the physicality of it. And so one allies that I really are grateful for, helped me was I was herbs. The herbal world was at least giving me some support. I was quite diligent with herbal medicine, especially skullcap. Skullcap is a herb that I used to grow in my garden. When my son died, before that we had bees, we had the vegetable garden. And when he died, that year after, the bees died, the garden died. We were in the valley of grief. Everything died. But luckily, I live in a community with a lot of herbal women. So herbs was definitely helpful. Also, like I said, 30 years of practice has created pathways. So my breath knows to breathe through my feet. Yeah, my these pathways are established, and that's why also when I'm supporting people, I'm very passionate in about regular practice, because we don't want to wait until the crisis, the storm comes, and then think that we can, it becomes very challenging to actually pick up those practices. But if we have established those circuits and pathways in our bodies, it's something that the body knows how to do on its own. Even when I couldn't do it, my breath, that's just how my breath moves. It moves down to the legs, to my pelvis. So it was a lot of grounding practices that I was clinging to, just very simple orientation in space, touching the body, just ways to anchor in the present moment. Yeah, orienting, allowing the body to orient into the present moment could help the body to recognize that there was no danger. But there were, in my underworld journey, there was so long periods where none of it really, it wasn't that relief. Usually I'm used to in my practice that I can go into a feeling and I can release it, and then I come out on the other side and I feel, rejuvenated or refreshed, or there's a kind of a catharsis in it. And there was such a long period where there was no other side. That's what I mean, that I couldn't really reach for these practices, because there was no, sometimes, something I recognized in myself was a certain kind of arrogance when even in the name of spirituality, when we think that we can process ourselves through everything, and then we will come out on the other side with an insight or with an aha. And when we are faced with grief, the grief doesn't have a resolution in that way. Yeah, the resolution is just how we are relating to grief. We are learning a different humility of what we are part of, this existence, which is life, death, life, death, life, death. Yeah, there's a sense of, I could see that unconsciously I had thought that if I just practice enough in my devotion to God, it's almost like then I can be exempt from that, from pain, from that brutality and beauty of the life-death cycle. Yeah. I was like, I mentioned I felt so betrayed by God, and I discovered this kind of entitled, childlike part of me that thought that if I only like, I was screaming at her, like, I gave my life to you. How can you take my son? And it was this entitled place of like, if I'm just meditate, if I'm a good girl, I'm going to be rewarded. Yeah, I'm going to be safe. But that is, that is not how things work. So there was also that part of my initiation, is that to come into the isness of things, to really land in the brutality and beauty of the goddess herself, of existence itself. So it's a sense of coming into congruence and alignment with what is. And that's when we can know the divine for real. We think that we can know her partially, yeah, like the nice parts. But then we can, that's only, she's not partial, yeah, she's whole, she's totality. So there's a sense of, it's so paradoxical, yeah, that there's a sense of such a beauty in coming into isness of things. There's such a, it's a homecoming. I'm coming home to where all the beings in existence lives. Yeah, we human, we think we can live in this parallel track and be exempt from the life-death cycle. Yeah, yeah, and that creates a lot of suffering, a lot of stress, a lot of effort to try to keep us, ourselves away from it. And in a deepest sense, the most severe consequence is that we then can never know the divine for real.
And
Because
we're
we,
at war with ourselves. Just
yes.
like, this isn't okay. I can't be feeling this. I can't be experiencing this.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes what it takes to come to that relaxation, like you mentioned, of just finally just letting go. Took me years in that process to be able to finally do that. It's like exhaust every possible avenue idea of like how this could be, how we could get out of it faster.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout this, you're a businesswoman,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, responsible for a company and people who work for you and a community of women that you serve. How did you navigate that piece of it, the professional piece, as you were going through this dissolution?
Yes. Yes, like I mentioned, I remember a moment I was sitting on my couch, and this was just a few months into the pandemic, and there was a conversation I had with one of my colleagues who I had worked with for a long time, and she was considering ending or not working, the quitting. And something happened in me where I went. I remember it was like a split. It was like a split. I split off into a coping strategy where I went in with this kind of, I took on the Superman cape. I'm going to just fix all of this and all the financial stress of this pandemic. It was enormous amount of, money we had to refund, we had to cancel, big retreats.
What was it about that conversation with the colleague that made
Yes,
you?
it was a it was an abandonment. It was an abandonment fear that
Okay.
was touched. And
You
then,
thought, oh well, she's
yes,
quitting,
she's going to leave me.
so I need to just get
I'm
in
going
high
to,
gear
yes,
and make this work.
exactly. Yes, exactly. And it's a moment like that that is very parallel to what happened when I was a child, when my family fell apart and my father left, when I went into a role of being the one that could create harmony and could kind of say, I thought as a little child that I could save them, I could make them happy. Yeah, I could save them from this horrible suffering they were in. And so I went in, and that has been part of my identity in one way. And of course, then I have had my spiritual awakenings. I have looked through the shadows of things. I have looked at different identities. I have recognized myself deeper than the different roles. So it was, what happened in that moment was that I started to kind of, that role that had just been hovering underneath became very visible, like that savior, like I can do this for everybody. So I sacrificed myself. Yeah. I didn't. And in that moment, I could have said, oh, I let go. I can let the people go. Everybody has to take care of themselves and apply for unemployment, like many companies had to do. But in that moment, I just override, and I was just putting myself aside and just like, I'm going to save everybody. And I was running on that for those years. And it was almost like it became a cartoon version of a coping strategy. So it became very visible. And especially when these, when the death happens, the divorce was unfolding, it became more and more extreme how I kept holding everything together. Like I was teaching a course 3 weeks after my son died, for example. Yeah. It was this sense of like, I can do it. I can do it. I'm not going to disappoint anybody. It became more and more extreme until it became unbearable. And that's when I started to see how I have created a reality around me based on this persona, based on this generous, self-sacrificing, and that these are also qualities that in spirituality somehow are, they look very spiritual. They are, they are looked
And also
upon
kind of
as
like qualities
good.
of the goddess, like I can show up in
Yeah,
hard times,
exactly.
like I'm a warrior. And
Exactly. Endless
yeah.
energy. And it was also easy for me to recognize it because before the pandemic, I had a life that was not very not stressful at all, actually. I was very much had a lot of retreat time for myself. I was teaching, but it was not so visible to me that this program was running. So it needed to be this extreme for me to see it. And when it started to fall apart, where it's just kind of got stretched so thin, it didn't work anymore. That's when I was thrown into the despair, the suicidal despair that I felt as a girl. That I then went into this role to try to escape, to try to avoid. So I have been identified in my life as trusting life, and I was thrown into the most devastating mistrust. I have been identified as someone who loves life, and I was thrown into suicidal despair. I was identified with someone who has like a kind of a joyful disposition. I was thrown into deep depression, like I couldn't move. Depression. I was identified with someone who has unshakable trust in goddess. I was thrown into utter mistrust and terror and fear. So, which sounds like not very positive, but that is what I can see now. Yeah, that I can see what a gift that is, because that set me free. It set me free.
That's the path to your wholeness.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Or
Exactly.
like,
And it's like,
Jung's work on individuation.
yes. And it's like we think that we think that or I so for example, to be self-sufficient or capable, yeah, these positive identities, yeah, one can think that that is kind of closer to the divine. And the paradox what I discovered in this process was it was through me fully feeling my utter neediness. One of my my most potent doors was to come into contact with my desire, which was something that I identified with someone who was serving the goddess. I don't do desire. And desire, neediness, greediness, all of these qualities we think are going to kind of, keep us trapped in a small self. It was doorways into the most incredible com communion with the divine, because I was no longer in the strategies of trying to avoid those places.
One of the things on this podcast that we focus on is internal family systems. And that was one of the modalities that that I started working with very intensively during my years of heartbreak. And now that I'm trained in it, and just to like translate some of what you're saying into IFS language, is like you had really strong managers for showing up and serving and kind of being the savior. And that was old protective strategies that your system learned to take on when you were very young and your father left, and there's just a lot of chaos in your family of origin. And this experience allowed you to see just the hyper functioning of those managers and how that's just not serving you anymore. And as they started to step aside, it just brought that flood of the exiles that they've been protecting for all these years. And those exiles just flooded your system, but then they allowed you to come into direct relationship with them, like your essential self to come into relationship with them. And then just to create a whole recalibration in your system that's not running on those protective strategies anymore.
Yeah. And there's so many layers to that. Yeah. One thing that I discovered was that even in my spiritual awakening around, in my early 30s, there was an awakening to self, like to the bigger self, beyond, deeper than the different roles and identities. And then I remember I started on the goddess path and the embodiment path. And it was also a kind of a reaction to the path I've been on until then, where I was like a lot about transcendence and getting out of the body. And then I met the goddess, and it was like all about descending and into the body, being here. So then, but even in that movement, like, I want to be more embodied. In that shift, it was like a shift into embodiment. What I discovered was I left behind a part of me that absolutely don't want to be in the body. It's terrified being in the body. That just wanted to disappear and didn't want to be here. And that part got so exiled, even in the name of, shadow work, embodiment work, because it didn't have a place in what I saw as healthy. Because most will agree that yes, it's healthy to be embodied. It's healthy to. So one has to be kind of diligent with bringing all parts of us with us. And now now after this journey, I know that I will. I know that I don't know. I know that I will never be fully aware. I know that there is always, as long as we identify with one aspect, there will be a shadow to it. It will be a hidden part that is then rejected.
And that's just the human experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, like you said, there's so many layers, and there's never going to not be more layers and more things that we're uncovering and discovering. Another thread that you mentioned that I wanted to pull out a little bit is menopause, and myself moving towards that. I'm 47, and just in this past year, I've started to notice more strongly, I'm in perimenopause. Like, just kind of like hit me like over the head, even though I was like kind of preparing for it. I was like, this is it. Okay, I'm more just pronouncedly moving into this new transition. And I'm just wondering if you can, I know a lot of women listening can relate, and I'm wondering if you can speak a bit more about your experience of menopause.
Yes, like I said, for me, menopause happened, parallel with all of these different things. But I see it as part of the same movement of my soul. The soul, or the essence of my being, pressing itself through, wanting to incarnate fully as itself, as fully as me in this lifetime. And I feel it's really, really essential to hold the menopause transition in the framework of initiation. it is as total and radical of a shift as we went through when we were going from child and through teenage years. Yeah? This very profound physical transition, yeah, where you leave the child and then you are an adult. And of course, you will keep growing as an adult and you will keep growing after menopause. But it's kind of that kind of shift that we are going through. And again, there is an opportunity there because there's such a strong forces that are in play. There's like the cosmic forces of transformation is playing itself out in this little micro body. Yeah. So one can ride it in a sense of if one dare. And some have the choice, some don't, some just are thrown into it, but some have the choice to skip through a little bit. But I think most will be affected somehow. My mother, she shared with me she said she wasn't affected at all by it. I'm not sure how self-aware she is, but
That's what, yeah.
But
and how just much it was in cultural awareness, even
exactly.
to have the self-awareness.
Yes, exactly. I actually remember back to some of the fights we had at that time, and then I realized, how old was she then? She was going through menopause. But there's something evolutionary that is available, that is moving and working through, which is an incredible experience. And it has to also, because your hormones shift. Yeah. So there's a shift there's a lot of hormones that are not as strong anymore, that are hormones that keeps you compromising, basically, because there's hormones that are designed to help you fit in, yeah, and be safe and caretake, and all of those hormones shifts. And there is a opportunity in that to get to know oneself. Like for me, I have gotten to know a new me, and it feels new and it feels familiar. It feels as if I have aspects of myself that now finally have the chance to incarnate. Like parts of me are incarnating for the first time, it feels almost, or first time since I was very little, before I started to coagulate into more of a fixed personas and identities and parts. So it was like there's a sense of a curiosity towards myself, of like, who am I? What is this that wants to be lived through me now? There's a more direct access to me. And it's a sense of an innocence and a wisdom at the same time that is birthing through. It feels very fresh and young in one way, or timeless, like very, very fresh. And at the same time, it has the wisdom of all the years that I've lived. Yeah, so there's something so relaxed about it. There's a sense in my life now, when I'm on the other side. This whole last year have been a reckoning. It's been a kind of a settling into a new me. And I have, coming out of 2 years of just cleaning job. For me, it was like cleaning up the mess I created out of these roles. All the contracts, relational contracts I made with people, expectations people have about who I should be and what I should do. I had to learn to clean it all up and learn to say no. And what's amazing with menopause is that you are handed the fuel to be able to say no. Like every day I know I go like, I see some hooks coming my way. I know old Chameli would have jumped on that hook and like, I can fix this for you. I can do. And now the hook is coming my way and it falls to the ground. And almost every day I go like, look at new Chameli. Look at Chameli saying no. Look at Chameli. I go like, wow. Like I have my ex-husband, he lives next door. So I get
Oh, wow.
it's such an amazing mirror because I get tested and I really see, wow, like patterns I have been acting out my entire lives, they're just not here anymore. I'm just in awe, in awe of the freedom. So I'm fiercely protective also of the space I'm in right now. I have learned to set boundaries in a whole new way. But again, the fuel is there within the transformation that is happening physically. That's my experience.
So it sounds like in terms of this particular transformation cycle,
Mm-hmm.
you're still emerging. Like you're not fully out of the cycle. You're in like the very late stages of it. Does that sound accurate?
I would say that the last year I'm in the I'm still in the clearing phase for me. Like I'm still saying no. I'm saying no, no, no. Empty space, empty space, empty space,
Yeah.
empty space, empty space, empty space. I'm very protective. I'm going to become very clear. One thing that menopause taught me and this whole journey taught me, it humbled me in a way that I got more aware of my limitations, that my capacity is not as I thought it was. I'm much more sensitive than I thought I was. And to be aware of my limitations is actually incredibly liberating, because then it's just a reckoning with, no, I'm not capable of doing that and that and that. It gives clarity and motivation of setting boundaries and reckoning with, oh, okay, I'm more fragile than I thought. And something that this whole journey has opened in me is an incredible self-love, a capacity to like self-compassion. Like compassion is part of the fruit of going through the dark. I feel you get humbled and you can feel there's so much compassion with the limitations of the human realm, and that includes myself. That I'm not that easily seduced by the ideals of who I should be. I'm more interested in creating circumstances for the living, breathing spirit to live and play through me as much as possible.
And Chameli, what would you say to a woman, particularly who's in a professional role and holding a lot in the world, as she's going through a challenging time, whether it's something that's personal or even just also navigating the state of the world right now? What would you tell her about how to best navigate those rougher waters?
Mm-hmm. There is a Greek myth about a goddess called Hestia, and we know Hestia as the goddess of the hearth, of the home. And Hestia, she's the one goddess in a group of gods and goddesses who doesn't leave home. Like all the gods and goddesses, they go out in the Greek mythology, there's so much drama, like a soap opera, they fall in love, they go war, dramas, intrigues. And Hestia, she always stays home. And so when the gods and goddesses are all bruised and tired, they will always come home to her fire, to Hestia's fire, and they will be fed and they will be nurtured. They can rest, they get food, they get soup, and then they go out again. And if we bring all of the aspects of this myth in our own consciousness, that all of these are parts of ourselves, is to remember that the to kind of feel yourself as circles, that the inner circle, the innermost flame of your being, that's what feeds everything else. So your assignment is to guard and to guard that source connection. And then from there, you can feel your life. Yeah. From that source connection, maybe it's from there, the next circle is your family or close relationships. And then comes extended family, friends, and then comes work and your service in the world. It can give us kind of a map of where the priorities must be. Because one can so easily run around in the outer circle, serving, thinking we are serving, thinking we are, being true to our purpose here in life, but we are running on empty. Yeah, the priorities has to be in the right order, in the right relationship. So always make sure that you tend to the flame in the center, that you create circumstances for yourself to be plugged into where the power is, where there's rejuvenation. Yeah. So that can help us to hold ourselves through, and to find out also before the crisis hits, is to find out what is that for you. What is that nurture you, what is that holds you and breathes you, what is that light that cannot die within you, and to see and to really become sober and see that, oh, that is the most important, because it feeds everything else. And that, when we come into that reckoning and we begin to see the intelligence of that kind of order, that also gives clarity and motivation to learn to say no, even if we want to, or we think we should do more. That we are more aware of just the specific packaging we have. It's going to be different from each one of us, how, what we need in order to stay connected with that flame in the center. It's going to be different. And, some of us carry, traumas in our bodies. We are perhaps more fragile than we would want to be. But the more honest we can become with it, the more we can be kind of the mother or the leader of our own self. Yeah. Where we can then, take care, say yes and no in a way that is aligned and serving ourselves. That's what I would say.
And what's next for you?
Oh, this last year has been a reckoning with an aspect of me that keeps thinking about what's next. Like I'm very creative. I have a lot of ideas all the time. And I remember I was saying this out loud sometimes in the spring, where I really landed in that my life as it is right now is everything I ever dreamed of. For me, it's very important to be alone. I'm alone with 4 animals. I'm not alone. I'm with them. I'm spend a lot of time with non-human contact, because there's something in my energy that resonates very much with the animal body, and I learn a lot about regulation and love from them. And I'm a lot in the woods, and it's again that kind of beingness that gets the highest priority in my life right now. Like, it's that very innocent part of me that just wants to be. And I was saying out loud, like, I don't want anything else than more of this. I want just this. And it's so simple. If people saw my life, it's, I'm just waking up, going to the woods, I'm seeing clients, doing, I'm traveling sometimes to do retreats. But it's a simple life. And I've never been happier in my entire life than right now. It's very, very, very ecstatic in its utter simplicity. And some people, I think, would find it very boring, the life I have. But for me, it's like, it's my whole system drinks up the harmony of my life right now, and I guard it fiercely like a mother. So even it can be tempting projects. If it adds any complexity, I say no. No, 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 not now. This is my moment. This is the moment. Finally, I'm 53. This is the moment where I get to live this beauty. And so the next for me is a few more weeks with the clients, and then I will have my retreat, my just retreat for myself over the holidays. And then I will travel. I will go to Europe and teach some retreats, go to India, do panchakarma for a month for myself. A good life, very, very good life.
That's really beautiful. And if listeners want to connect with you more, is there any place you want to direct people to?
Yes, you can go to awakeningwomen.com and you can look there. We have many self-study programs, so it's easy to jump in, and especially if you are drawn to practice with the goddess, awakeningwomen.com is the place to go. Yeah.
Thank you for being with us, Chameli, and for just so generously sharing about this passage that you have passed through and are emerging from. And I just appreciate your presence, your teachings, and being part of my journey in various ways over the past almost 2 decades.
Thank you so much. And thank you for opening the space to speak about these things. There's there's a lot of taboo when it comes to these places. And for those of us who, and we are many gone through them, there's such a thirst, to be sharing from these layers. Yeah, so thank you.